Hello there. Welcome back. We are studying and we are getting more insights as we go along. And I believe you have been enjoying the series so far. Have you ever have to really think about what you have to say before you open your mouth? Or should I put it this way? Have you ever really taken time to be sober because you wanted to prevent any form of tragedy? In September 1978, a very interesting occurrence happened in what is known as Camp David, found within Maryland of the United States of America. The world was watching three very important men, important in the context of what they stood for at that time. And they were President Jimmy Carter, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. They were all there for a very important purpose, because it was within a time of struggle to prevent a Middle Eastern catastrophe. What am I talking about? Well, until that time, Egypt and Israel had been locked in hostility for decades. Tens of thousands had died, borders were scarred, and trust was non existent. When you go through the annals of history, at one critical moment in the negotiations that ensued in Camp David, something was misinterpreted. A memorandum which was about to be signed had some iota of misinterpretation by some of the presidents, and that nearly collapsed the entire peace process. According to the records and some of the interviews which have ensued on various national television broadcasts, President Sadat believed Israel was secretly planning to retain sections of Sinai. Well, let me give you some foundational detail. Up until that time, Israel had occupied the Sinai Peninsula, which before then was being politically overseen by the Egyptians. But Begin, who happens to be the Prime Minister of Israel, believed Egypt also intended to control Jerusalem's access points. Wow. Two differing views, but stemming from misinterpretations in a memorandum. Of course, neither of the accusations was true. It was all a misunderstanding. But guess what? In the heat of political tension, misinterpretation felt like betrayal. The world held its breath. Would two nations go to war again over something neither actually meant? Well, we stand to see. Once again, welcome to Steady Insights. As we go along in our episodes, it is noteworthy to highlight this very interesting story in Joshua's 22nd chapter. As we read along, we see that as the Jordan River prepared to separate the tribes geographically, much like the political borders once separated Egypt and Israel, Joshua understood that distance could breed suspicion, and suspicion could breed conflict. In this very important step, he gives 2.5 tribes a series of instructions that form the spiritual glue preventing future fractures. What did Joshua talk about? I term it the farewell speech. And he told them to be very careful to keep the commandments. But outside of that, these were very important words, wise words, farewell speeches Joshua gave. He said that they love the Lord their God. And of course, this was stemming from the fact that love is a principle that leads them to God. Clearly, it was relevant for them to also walk in obedience to him. Joshua, one way or the other, might have had a hint of the possibility of them deviating from obedience to God. And Joshua indicated this to be the conduct expected even of those who choose to walk with God. They were also instructed to keep God's commands. Well, undeniably, obedience becomes the natural result of a grateful heart. Who wouldn't want to obey someone who gives him or her something to be cheerful for? It seldom happens, unless, well, love is not there. He told them again to hold fast to God. And that is a wonderful lesson even for us. And finally, to serve him with all their heart and their soul. A true purpose and satisfaction which brings about abundant life. Why would Joshua say all these things? Well, it was important. In fact, it was almost similar in context with Jimmy Carter's wisdom to keep fidelity at the center of the meeting that ensued between the Israeli Prime Minister, the Egyptian President, and the US President in Camp David 1978. Well, having set the premise, let me quickly discuss what really went on. In fact, you might be wondering, why did I even start with Egyptian-Israeli conflict? Well, before then, something almost similar happened. Near the memorial stones of Jordan, a monument of unity, that is, one that was erected by the 2.5 tribes, built a massive altar. Well, you would want to guess, what is the problem if you build an altar? Follow me closely. The rest of Israel saw it and panicked because they were thinking, is this a breakaway religion? Is it a rival worship center, or is it a rebellion? It was not just a spontaneous thought from the Israelites, because according to the Levitical laws, it was forbidden to offer sacrifices anywhere but the God-appointed altar. Guess what? The reaction was immediate. Prepare for war. Just as a misinterpreted document nearly brought Egypt and Israel to war in 1978, a misunderstood altar brought Israel to the brink of internal destruction. Luckily, or more appropriately, gracefully, before the swords were drawn, God stirred the hearts of wise men, leaders who chose to slow down and to seek understanding, which led the accused to explain. What was really the accusation then? Well, it was imperative that the Israelites clearly understand the morale behind the people, that is, the tribe of Reuben, the half tribe of Manasseh, and the tribe of Gad. It was imperative that by sending sentinels of change, they would really understand their motive. Phinehas, the son of the high priest, led the investigation. He had been the uncompromising instrument, if you remember, in just a few chapters before, of the judgment at Baal. And he understood the deadly cost of compromise. That is why Phinehas was chosen. And he clearly depicted such class of wisdom, of course, inspired by God. If sacrifices were offered on this new altar, God would punish new and all Israel. Yet Phinehas, unlike some in the delegation, offered an escape. He told them, return to the side where the sanctuary stood. In this case, he extended mercy before judgment truth anchored in hope. And here is the most interesting part. The kind answer which was given by the three tribes, the Reubenite tribe, the Gadites, and the Manasseh half-tribe. When they were accused, they acted in an exemplary manner. Number one, they listened to the accusations in silence. Well, perfectly for me, this is one of the greatest lessons I've learned. To listen to accusations in silence before any thoughts start to protrude in your head. They called God as their witness because inwardly they knew whatever they did was only inspired for the service of God. They accepted that if they were wrong, they had to be punished. Wow, that is bold. Then finally, they revealed their true motivations. Let me carefully touch on these 4 important points. When we are accused, usually our first response either rekindles the accuser to deepen in his or her accusation or retreat. In this case, when the people, that is Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, listened to the accusation in silence, they showed initial concession to hear. And continuing, they had invited the ultimate judge who judgment would be pronounced from. They called God to be their witness. And that is a more moral way to be able to clear our innocence, because they had accepted even to be punished if what they did was wrong. It was only after that that they showed their true motivations. In other words, they had set the premise that on no account were they going to say something other than what they really had wanted to do. Well, the altar actually that they built was not for rebellion. In fact, it was for remembrance. So basically, the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh were allocated at the other side of the Jordan. When the Israelites had entered Canaan, upon divisioning the land to all the tribes, these 3 tribes found their divisions, their lots, at the other side of the Jordan. And when it happened that they were now going there, they set this altar as a witness to future generations that though they were separated by the river, they belonged to the same covenant. Wow. They feared that one day the western tribes would say, "You have no share in the Lord." So they built the altar not as a place of sacrifice, but as a bridge of identity. Wonderful. That humility diffused what could have been Israel's first civil war. And the soft answer turned away wrath. Of course, you would expect that reconciliation had begun. And that quickly highlights what I preceded the whole lesson with. That is the Camp David Accords in 1978. In the heat of political tension, misinterpretation could have been betrayal. And Jimmy Carter, did what few leaders could. He delayed action, he demanded explanation, and insisted on understanding motives before drawing swords. And history remembers what happened next. It wasn't war, but peace, because men decided to listen before they judged. It applies truly to our current dispensation. Through the example, we can see the necessary steps to restore peace, especially for people who are within political spheres, this is very relevant, and even in leadership circles, down to our family circles. And these are some of the examples. Number one, it is very important to communicate your thoughts, because communication is the premise by which every thought is conveyed. Again, it is very relevant that one does not jump into conclusions, because this distorts reconciliation. As we see in the example of the Gadites, the Reubenites, and even the half-tribe of Manasseh, it is important to always disclose problems before acting, because probably what you are thinking to be the wrong could be totally different from the doer. It is important that we are willing to make sacrifices to achieve unity, as was demonstrated. Then, importantly, when we are accused, the only way to bring down the fury is to give a polite response. So that in all of this, peace can be destroyed. During 1978, the current political Israel was able to avert civil war, or even a war with the Egyptians, by virtue of the good deeds of Jimmy Carter. It was averted. Just as Egypt and Israel found peace at Camp David, Israel discovered that unity preserved not by similarity, but it's preserved by understanding. How do you tackle and respond to accusations? I've learned a lot, and I believe you have.